The chilly morning that opened October 2023 began with an unusual disturbance on Maple Street, Georgetown, Illinois. 5 unmarked police cars silently lined the tree-lined road, their lights flashing discreetly in the early mist. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering in confusion about what was happening in their otherwise peaceful neighborhood. Officers in bulletproof vests, carrying an arrest warrant, moved with organized precision around a small brick house at the end of the street. Inside, 52-year-old Ethan Rourke was brewing his morning coffee, a routine he had repeated for years like any ordinary man, punctual for work, cordial with neighbors, and never having had the police knock on his door. A knock echoed, 3 short decisive sounds. "Mr. Rourke," a deep voice stated. "We are the FBI and the Illinois State Police. You are being arrested in connection with the 2008 disappearance of Elena Pierce." According to the officer's accounts, in that moment, Rourke hesitated slightly. His hand trembled, a drop of coffee spilled over the edge of the cup, but his face remained strangely impassive. Without resistance or asking why, he quietly set the mug down. His eyes, according to one investigator, were like those of a man who knew this was bound to happen sooner or later. 15 years after a girl vanished from a dirt road between cornfields, Georgetown awoke to a heavy silence once more, and this time the silence signaled that the truth had finally returned. Before we delve into this shocking true story, let us know where you are watching from, and if you love journeys to find forgotten justice, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. The autumn afternoon of 2008, Georgetown, a small town nestled among the golden cornfields of the Midwest, maintained its usual calm. On the paved road running along Maple Street, the late afternoon sun gilded the low eaves, and a cool breeze carried the slightly damp scent of earth after last night's rain. Elena Pierce, 15 years old, left home on her familiar silver bicycle. She wore an ivory-colored sweater, a blue plaid scarf draped loosely around her neck, and told her mother she was heading to the small store near County Road 14 to buy a few school supplies. "I'll be home before dark," she said, her voice clear and light, and cycled away, her figure shrinking behind the trees lining the road. A neighbor, Mrs. Louise Carter, was the last person to see Elena. She was watering flowers on her porch, and looked up just in time to see the girl raise a hand in greeting. The wheels rolled quickly over the leaf-strewn pavement, the bicycle chain clicking softly in the wind. Miss Carter watched until the ivory sweater disappeared around the bend, the thin, late-day sunlight lingering in the air like a small streak of light. Afterward the road returned to silence. Only the soft whistle of the wind through the dry corn stalks, and the faint sound of a wooden gate latching on a distant house remained. Then everything faded into quiet. In the small Pierce family home, the afternoon passed normally. Miss Diane Pierce cooked dinner, glancing out the window as she worked. Mr. Robert sat reading the newspaper, but his eyes kept returning to the wall clock. The sunlight outside the porch gradually faded, replaced by the cold blue of twilight. Dinner was served, and the two sat waiting, at first exchanging fragmented conversation, then settling into silence. Elena's chair remained empty. When it was completely dark, Mrs. Diane called her daughter. No one answered. Mr. Robert tried again, then a few more times, all met with only the long hopeless sound of ringing. A sense of unease spread quickly, like another shadow creeping into the house. They hurriedly grabbed their coats and drove along County Road. The car slowly passed the rows of dried corn, headlights sweeping across the old sign of the small store. The shopkeeper shook his head when they asked. No one had seen Elena since the sun was still high on the hill. They continued to circle the neighborhood, past the gas station and the small bridge over the creek, calling her name into the night wind. The calls echoed into the distance and dissolved into the emptiness. When they returned, the meal was cold on the table, the clock nearing midnight. No words were exchanged. Only a shared look between the two. Fear had solidified into certainty. Mr. Robert walked to the small table in the living room, and picked up the landline phone. The yellow light cast on his pale face, his hands trembling. He took a deep breath, looked over at his wife, and dialed the number. His voice was hoarse, catching midway. "My daughter hasn't come home." In the small dispatch room of the Georgetown Police Department, the on-duty officer, Sergeant Matt Connolly, immediately straightened up, grabbed his notebook, and quickly asked for the name, address, description, and last known site. As he typed the first lines onto the keyboard, the familiar sound of the system announcing a new case rang out. A missing juvenile report had just been opened. 10 minutes later, the first patrol car left the lot. Red and blue lights flashed on the brick walls of the sleeping town, reflecting in the dark windows. When the car arrived at the Pierce home, Connolly stepped out, carrying a clipboard and a serious gaze. He met the Pierces on the porch, both pale, eyes red from worry. The exchange was brief but tense. The time Elena left home, her clothing, the silver bicycle, the last known direction. Mrs. Diane tried to recall, her voice faltering. She just intended to go to the store near Road 14. Connolly noted every detail and then turned on his radio, informing Central Command. Opening missing persons file, female, 15 years old, last seen, County Road 14, late afternoon. The message was transmitted instantly. On the computer screen at headquarters, the words missing juvenile, Helena Pierce appeared amidst countless radio signals. An official file was created numbered Deno 8809, NPV 17. Before dawn the search began. 2 police cars, a rescue vehicle, and a K-9 unit left the center. Georgetown, the usually quiet town, now blazed with flashing lights. Residents woke to the distant sirens, sparsely gathering outside their yards. Some volunteers carried flashlights, others grabbed hastily printed maps. The entire town seemed to breathe in sync with the Pierce family's fear. The search teams were divided into 3 directions. Connolly commanded the main direction along County Road 14, where Elena was last seen. Another rescue team swept the small creek south of town. A few people with search dogs followed the lingering scent from the girl's house. Flashlights swept across every patch of grass, illuminating the patchy dirt tracks. Calls of Elena rang out, fading in the early mist. As the first light shone on the fields, the cold wind rattled the yellow flags, erected beside the road. At the edge of the dirt path leading out of town, a young officer discovered the first clue, the silver bicycle lying tipped over by the field's edge. The rear wheel had a few broken spokes, the chain was off the sprocket, and mud clung to the frame. There was no blood, no skid marks, only an unusual silence. The scene was immediately secured. A forensic technician from Vermilion County was dispatched, wrapping the area with yellow tape. He knelt down, observing the depressed soil next to the bike. There were signs of large tire tracks, not matching the bicycle's size, extending for several yards before disappearing into the weeds. A small light blue handkerchief, confirmed by Mrs. Diane as the one Elena wore, was flipped up by the wind. As the forensic team photographed and collected soil samples, Connolly stepped back, his eyes fixed on the seemingly endless stretch of field. He knew this was no longer a case of typical missing person. Professional instinct told him, someone had stopped on this road, long enough for Elena never to make it home. The preliminary report was sent back to the station via radio. A voice rang out clearly, scene confirmed. No blood, but suspicious tire mark. Continue expanding the search radius to 2 miles. That morning, the people of Georgetown, accustomed only to the sound of church bells and passing trucks, now quietly watched the convoy of rescue vehicles driving along the dirt road. Everyone carried a vague fear, yet unspoken. By the afternoon, the area around County Road 14 had become a maze of warning tape, maps, flashlights and footprints. From above, a drone was deployed to scan the creekside forest area. On the ground, the search dog stopped beside a tree stump, barking hoarsely a few times before falling silent. A technician knelt to pick up something glistening, a long brown strand of hair, caught between the dry blades of grass. He gently removed it and placed it in a clear sealed bag. As the sun sank behind the fields, the last remaining light illuminated Elena's bicycle, which was now covered with a tarp, and being transported away by a specialized vehicle. Connolly watched, gripping his notebook tightly. Below the words missing juvenile he circled an additional note in red ink. Possible abduction, limited physical evidence, tire marks and hair are the first leads. In the distance, police lights flashed in the mist. The search had not stopped, but within everyone's hearts, something had changed. The chilling feeling of loss was approaching rapidly. The search continued, relentlessly, but hope thinned with each passing day. Volunteer groups took turns walking along the fields, the creeks, and the forest edges. Flashlights swept across every bush, every damp patch of ground, and then died out in the early mist. They no longer spoke much, only the crunch of footsteps and the hoarse barking of search dogs in the wind remained. The missing posters began to fade. Elena's photo with her bright smile on the white paper was now yellowed and crumpled by the rain. As the silence lengthened, Georgetown seemed to sink into a suffocating anticipation. In the hearts of the residents, everyone knew a truth was drawing near, although no one dared to speak it. And then the tip came from Perry County, Indiana, a call reporting the body of a teenage girl found near a shallow pond, adjacent to an abandoned cornfield. The first to discover it was a local farmer. While clearing a water pipe, he smelled a strange odor rising from the old pond and saw something caught in the reeds. When Perry County police arrived, they recognized it as the body of a young girl. The ivory sweater was stained with mud, one of her sneakers was missing, and her long brown hair was matted and tangled with dry blades of grass. On her left wrist, a silver bracelet engraved with the letters EP remained intact, only slightly tarnished by the water. A broken plastic watch lay nearby, its hands stopped at an undetermined moment. The notification was immediately sent to the Georgetown Police Department. Sergeant Matt Connolly was the first to take the call from Indiana. He was silent for a long time, then hung up the phone and stepped out onto the porch. The sky over the town was as gray as it had been for days, but in his heart he knew the search had reached its conclusion. Just not the way anyone had hoped. A joint federal investigation team was quickly formed. Illinois and Indiana cooperated in opening a cross-state investigation, bringing forensic specialists, technicians and criminal police to the scene. The pond area was cordoned off with yellow tape, moist smoke rose from the mud, and a pungent odor mixed with the wind. Technicians knelt to collect every piece of evidence: a beer can, a few thin electrical wires, a discolored rubber glove. Each object was numbered, photographed and carefully sealed. The body was placed on a stretcher and covered with a white sheet. No one spoke as the forensic vehicle departed. Only the clicking of cameras and the rustle of footsteps in the mud remained. In Georgetown, the news spread faster than any official communique could be issued. People stopped in the market, in the coffee shop, at the gas station down the street. Everyone knew the story had reached its conclusion, awaiting only official confirmation. In the Perry County Medical Center forensics room, the identification took place in silence. Mr. Robert Pierce walked in, followed by a police officer. The room was cold, fluorescent lights shining on the white sheet. When the sheet was pulled back, no words were necessary. The silver bracelet, the broken watch, and the brown hair were enough to answer everything. Mr. Robert nodded, then turned away, his hands clenched and trembling. The internal confirmation was issued at the same time local media began to report. Body of a teenage girl found in Perry County suspected to be Elena Pierce, 15, Georgetown, Illinois. A short sentence, but enough to silence the entire town. At the store Elena used to visit, the owner took down the missing person poster. At the high school, students quietly placed flowers in front of her picture in the main hall. Connolly and the investigative team arrived in Indiana that night. He looked down at the murky pond, once surrounded by dozens of people, now only showing signs of churned earth and caution tape fluttering in the wind. The forensic technician handed him a temporary report. No signs of drifting from elsewhere. The body was in place. There were signs of ligature marks around the neck and shoulder. Connolly hastily wrote in his notebook, the handwriting slightly shaky from the wind: possible homicide, cause of death pending. That evening, St. Mary's Church rang its bells 3 times, though there was no service. Residents gathered under the dim yellow light, some carrying candles, others simply standing silently. No one spoke of searching anymore, only whispered the name Elena. The feeling of loss spread through the town like an inescapable cold wind. The next morning, the Illinois State Police officially announced the missing person case of Elena Pierce was being transferred to a homicide case. File No. 809 MP117 was renamed Case No. 08. All samples, reports and minutes were handed over between the 2 states, with Connolly's signature at the bottom of the page. On his desk in his small office, Elena's photo remained. The girl with brown hair and a slight smile. Now everyone knew she was no longer out there somewhere. The search had ended, but the investigation had only just begun. The body of Elena Pierce was transported to the Springfield Forensic Center on a gloomy afternoon, the sky covered in gray clouds. The specialized vehicle moved slowly, its flashing blue and red lights sweeping past the damp trees lining the road. Inside, the silence was absolute, broken only by the steady hum of the air conditioner. On the desk of Margaret Lewis, the chief forensic pathologist for the state of Illinois, the file case N08809 HC117 had just been placed, marking the beginning of the most critical phase of the investigation. The autopsy room was cold and bright, the smell of disinfectant permeating the air. When the white sheet was pulled back, the entire team fell silent for a moment. Elena was only 15, her face still retaining a childish innocence despite being slightly distorted by the time spent in the water. Lewis donned gloves and bent down, carefully examining every detail, every minute trace left behind. Each bruise and abrasion was photographed and numbered. Beside her, forensic assistant Tyler Klein read the information aloud. Sex, female. Estimated age 15, weight 52, condition of the body, partial decomposition. The initial signs were telling. There were deep, circular bruises around the neck and shoulder area, suggesting strong force applied by a cord or rope-like object. The subcutaneous blood vessels in the neck area were ruptured, and there were petechial hemorrhages in the eyes, characteristics of mechanical asphyxia caused by strangulation or ligature. Forensics noted no stab wounds or injuries from sharp objects, confirming the perpetrator did not use a cutting or stabbing weapon. When the layer of mud was washed away, the forensic team focused on the victim's hands. Under her fingernails, there was residue of dirt, fabric fibers and some skin cells. A small sample was separated and placed in a test tube labeled Specimen 12, fingernail scrapings. Dr. Lewis murmured, "If she fought back, this could be the most important evidence." The victim's clothing was also meticulously examined. The ivory-colored sweater was slightly torn at the neck. The fabric stretched a sign of a struggle. The jeans and sneakers were largely intact, lacking the heavy mud found on the shoulder and neck areas, suggesting the body was moved after death. A few beige microfibers were found clinging to the back of the sweater and the right arm, completely different from the sweater's material. This fiber sample was separated and sealed in a plastic evidence bag. Dr. Lewis tilted her head, observing more closely through the microscope. The fibers had a synthetic structure, nylon mixed with woven threads, common in the lining of truck or van carpet. "If we're lucky," she said, "we might be able to trace it to the exact type of vehicle." In the provisional report, Lewis estimated the time of death to be around 4, based on body temperature, decomposition level, and rigor mortis. Elena was likely killed not long after she left Georgetown. This meant that while the entire town was eating dinner, the killer was somewhere with her on that quiet dirt road. The toxicology screen showed no signs of alcohol, sleeping pills or sedatives. This ruled out the possibility that Elena was drugged before being murdered. However, traces of sand and mud were found in her mouth and trachea, indicating she may have inhaled muddy water while struggling, reinforcing the conclusion of mechanical asphyxia as the cause of death. As the collection of tissue samples, fibers and foreign matter was completed, the ISP DNA lab began processing. Preliminary results showed male DNA traces in the sample taken from under the victim's fingernails, which did not match any family profiles provided. The sample was too small for specific identification, but sufficient to know Elena had fought back and scratched her attacker in her final moments. Dr. Lewis signed the final report, the writing clear and decisive. Cause of death, mechanical asphyxia, due to ligature strangulation. Manner of death, homicide. A copy of the report was sent to the Illinois State Police, ISP, marking the start of the official investigation. The file case N08809 HC117 moved from pending autopsy to active investigation. When the dossier was placed on Sergeant Matt Connolly's desk, he looked at the word homicide with a heavy heart. Now, all suspicion had become reality. Elena Pierce was not lost, not kidnapped and abandoned. She had been murdered. In the morning meeting at ISP headquarters, a special investigative team was formed, consisting of Illinois State Police, Perry County representatives, and 2 forensic specialists. The whiteboard in the conference room displayed 4 lines of notes. Date of time of death, 4 6 hours after leaving home. Cause mechanical asphyxia, probable ligature strangulation. Ruled out, no signs of sharp force attack or poisoning. Connolly looked around the table, his voice low. We're no longer investigating a missing persons case. This is a homicide, and someone out there is still The team agreed to broaden the search for the suspicious van reportedly seen near County Road 4. One technician analyzed old satellite imagery, while others cross-referenced vehicle registration lists for cars with interior linings matching the beige fiber type. Meanwhile, the male DNA sample was sent to the central lab in Springfield for comparison with the National TOTUS database. The meeting ended in silence. In the hallway, Connolly paused before the notice board displaying Elena's photo. He reached out to straighten the dog-eared paper, looking at her brown eyes that now only existed in a forensic file and the testimony of the person who found her. The report from Springfield was subsequently sealed in a black file cover and sent to the ISP with a final note, forensic report complete. Initial evidence sufficient to confirm homicide. Immediate expanded investigation recommended. In the bright cold room, the printer kept running, paper steadily coming out, each sheet a piece of the truth. And amidst those impersonal lines of text, a new case officially opened. The case of Elena Pierce. The forensic report from Springfield was still fresh when Sergeant Matt Connolly's investigative team reopened the map of the County Road 14 area, where Elena Pierce vanished. Every road, turn, neighborhood, and nearby farm was circled in red. They decided to return to the scene, meticulously reviewing every detail, this time with a different mindset, no longer searching for a missing person, but for the one who took her life. In the morning briefing, a dispatcher compiled statements from residents in the area. Most claimed they saw nothing unusual, but one testimony caught the entire room's attention. A woman living near the dirt road leading to the cornfield recounted seeing an unusually slow-moving white van on the afternoon Elena disappeared. The van had no advertisements or markings, and the rear windows were tinted black. She distinctly recalled a heavy engine noise, and the smell of burnt gasoline, like a vehicle carrying equipment or tool. Notes on the board: white van, no markings, older model, possible tradesman's vehicle. From that detail, the investigative team began cross-referencing a list of white van owners in the Georgetown area and 2 neighboring towns. The results showed over 30 names, but one name immediately stood out: Ethan Rourke, 37, a freelance electrician living on the southern outskirts of town. He had been arrested 7 years prior for harassing a female client, though he only received an administrative fine due to lack of evidence. Rourke lived alone in a small rented house with a garage containing an older model white van, whose license plate had been replaced once last year. Neighbors described him as quiet, often leaving early and returning late, always looking like he was in a hurry. A few people said they had seen Rourke's van parked near the convenience store where Elena stopped before vanishing, but no one could recall the exact date or time. That noon, the investigative team knocked on Rourke's door. He opened it, a coffee cup in his hand, looking slightly flustered to see the police. Connolly introduced himself, presented a subpoena, and invited him to the station to assist with the investigation. Rourke didn't object, merely shrugging. "If you guys think I know something, go ahead and ask." In the interrogation room, Rourke leaned back in his chair, hands clasped. Connolly started gently asking him about his work itinerary on the day Elena went missing. Rourke replied that he was in Mattoon, fixing the electrical system at a warehouse that day, but didn't recall the address because he just followed the GPS. When asked if anyone witnessed or signed off on the work, he shook his head. "The owner wasn't there, I just replaced the wiring and left." Connolly glanced at his colleague, then wrote in his notebook, "No witness, no invoice, no timesheet." The technical investigator reviewed Rourke's cell phone data. The results were concerning. During the time Elena left home, Rourke's device pinged in an area less than 3 miles from the scene of the disappearance, not Mattoon as he claimed. However, the area had poor signal strength, and the data only recorded a few faint pings, making it impossible to definitively confirm his location. Connolly leaned back in his chair, looking at the man across from him. "Can you explain why your phone was in that area?" Rourke was silent for a moment, then replied, "Maybe I drove through there. I often take back roads to avoid tolls, not enough to charge him, but too coincidental to ignore." The police decided to collect Rourke's DNA sample with a court order, to compare it with the sample found under Elena's fingernails. As the forensic doctor swabbed his mouth, Rourke remained calm, even offering a faint smile. "I have nothing to hide. You're just wasting your time." While awaiting the results, the investigative team searched Rourke's van and house. The 1999 white van had an old interior, but the floor was lined with a beige nylon carpet, the same tone as the microfibers found on Elena's sweater. When the technician used a bright light, they found a few loose fibers and scuff marks on the floor, near where his electrical tools were kept. A small sealed bag was immediately labeled, noting, "Sample, carpet fiber, suspect vehicle." Inside the house, everything was unusually tidy. There were no traces of mud, no dirty clothes, nothing out of the ordinary except for a wall calendar, with a day torn off mid-month, coinciding with the time Elena went missing. Connolly frowned, instructing the technician to collect all trash from the kitchen bin for biological trace testing. Returning to the interrogation room, he placed a photo of Rourke's van in front of him, and said slowly, "Are you aware that the carpet in your van matches the color of the microfibers found on Elena Pierce?" Rourke gave a slight laugh, his voice tinged with sarcasm. "Do you think all the trucks in this area are different? I bought that mat at Home Depot. Dozens of other people could have the same one." Connolly didn't answer, just looked straight into his eye. Rourke's composure did not reassure him. On the contrary, it was too perfect, too calculated. The DNA test results would not be immediately available, so Rourke was temporarily released. The police kept the van for further examination. That night, leaving headquarters, Connolly looked out the window. The light from the lab reflected on the thin layer of rain. In his hand was the provisional report noting, "DNA under victim's nails. Male, partial match possible once comparison complete." He knew well. Every clue pointed toward one person, but it wasn't enough for an indictment. Meanwhile, the press began reporting on the electrician suspect and the mysterious white van. Georgetown stirred again, people chatting, each with their own story. Some said they saw Rourke at the tavern that night, others swore he drove through town heading toward Indiana. Within the investigative team, the pressure escalated. Connolly knew that without concrete evidence, the case could slide into a dead end like hundreds of others. He ordered an expansion of the search perimeter. Mud from Rourke's tires was sent to the geological lab. His phone was requested to be fully decrypted for its location history, and the list of his clients was reviewed name by name. When all the documents were gathered on the table, Connolly underlined a line in his notebook. "Ethan Rourke, electrician, prior arrest. Has van, had opportunity. Signs of lying." Outside, the rain fell heavily, tapping on the roof of the police headquarters. Connolly looked up at Elena's photo pinned to the board. The girl with the slight smile who had now become the center of a case more complex than anyone imagined. And in the silence of the room, broken only by the scratch of his pen, he wrote one final line. "If not him, then who did it?" The samples collected from Ethan Rourke's white van were sealed and sent to the Springfield Forensic Laboratory, the facility that handled evidence in major Illinois cases. The seal bore the red inscription "Priority Evidence Case." Inside were 3 small bags containing nylon carpet fibers, a sample of mud taken from the tire, along with a copy of the microfiber sample recovered from Elena Pierce's sweater. In the lab, materials analysis specialist Samuel Cortez bent under the cold light of the scanning electron microscope. Each fiber was photographed at thousands of times magnification, revealing its twisted structure and chemical composition. The initial results showed that the beige microfibers on Elena's sweater matched the material of the floor lining inside a 1993 Dodge van. The same type of nylon polyester blend, with the characteristic cross-weave pattern used by the manufacturer in its commercial models from the 90s. Cortez noted, "The possibility of random coincidence is very low. The structural material similarity rate is 98.7%, but he cautiously added in parentheses, "Cannot confirm this is precisely from the suspect's vehicle without unique wear or damage characteristic." At the adjacent bench, the DNA team continued to process the biological sample from Elena's fingernails. In the test tube, the solution containing the mixture of skin cells was carefully extracted. However, the amount of DNA was too minute, only a few dozen nanograms, insufficient to create a complete genetic profile. When the technician reported this, Cortez merely nodded slightly. "We have pieces of the puzzle, but we still lack the full picture. The DNA sample was run against the CODIS database, but the result returned a cold line. No match found. The provisional report was printed, spanning over 10 pages. It clearly stated, their cited, microfiber result, matches the material type of 1993 Dodge van carpet, similar to suspect Rourke's vehicle. DNA result, insufficient sample quantity to create a comparative profile, only male gender identified. Conclusion, possible connection, but insufficient evidence for indictment. Cortez sat for a long time after signing the conclusion. He knew well that this type of report often stalled an investigation. No DNA, no camera footage, no direct witness. Everything was just a string of indirect fragments. At ISP headquarters, Sergeant Matt Connolly received the dossier early in the morning. When he opened it, the light from the window illuminated the first page, Forensic Analysis, Springfield Crime Lab. Every line seemed to tighten his feeling of disappointment. All the investigative team's work over the past few weeks now culminated in 2 words, possible connection. Connolly put the report down, calling the state prosecutor's office. On the other end was Janet Linder, the deputy prosecutor, handling cases with insufficient evidence. Her voice was even and sober. Without confirming DNA or a confession, the court won't accept the indictment. You need something more concrete. We have the microfibers, a coinciding timeline, evidence Rourke lied about his whereabouts. Connolly replied, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. But no proof he touched the victim. Linder stated firmly, I know you want to catch him, but the law doesn't rely on a feeling. The call ended, leaving a thick silence in the room. Connolly leaned back in his chair, looking up at the investigation board with Elena's photo, amidst dozens of yellow notes. Red strings connected the name Ethan Rourke to the white van and the beige microfiber. A nearly complete network, missing only one final knot, the identifying proof. While the investigative team continued to canvass the area, the Springfield lab made further effort. They sent a request for assistance to the National Materials Center in Quantico, hoping to use molecular spectroscopy to determine the aging of the carpet fiber, which could indicate whether the fabric sample on Elena's sweater truly came from the same production batch as Rourke's vehicle. The results subsequently showed a high but not unique correlation. Another specialist, Rebecca Himes, suggested further analysis of the mud stuck on Rourke's van floor. Under the optical microscope, she identified small calcium crystals mixed with red clay loam, a characteristic form of soil near County Road 14. This finding was added as a supplement. Mud in suspect's vehicle is compatible with the soil composition of the scene area. Connolly paused at that point. He knew that from an investigative standpoint, this was a critical piece. But legally, it was still only compatibility, not proof. The police could not reconstruct the entire crime with ambiguous traces. In the internal meeting, a young investigator asked, if he truly is the perpetrator, why didn't we find anything clearer? No fingerprints, no blood, no camera footage. Connolly replied, because he knew what he was doing. This isn't the first time he's made someone scared. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. Everyone understood, when evidence stops at the level of possibility, the case risks sliding into a cold storage drawer labeled cold case. That afternoon, the completed forensic report was officially sent to the Illinois State Prosecutor's Office. The final page was bolded, based on the current evidence, there is insufficient basis to affirm a direct link between suspect Ethan Rourke and victim Elena Pierce. Recommend continued expanded investigation or awaiting advancements in DNA technology to reanalyze the sample. Janet Linder placed the report on her desk. Closing her eyes for a moment, she understood that this case, like hundreds of other files on the shelf, would have to be shelved temporarily, at least until something new emerged. In Georgetown, people still mentioned Elena's name in small conversations, and Rourke, though not arrested, still lived under the suspicious gaze of the entire town. The police quietly continued surveillance, but the official file was closed. In Connolly's office, Elena's photo on the bulletin board had faded. He took off his glasses, looking through the misty window pane. A case that seemed so close to the truth was now just a forensic report with a cold conclusion. Possible connection, but insufficient to indict. The months following the forensic report, the atmosphere at the Georgetown Police Department became heavier than ever. The Elena Pierce case file, now nearly 2 inches thick, sat stacked amidst a series of crime scene notes, forensic results, and dozens of conflicting witness statements. Every meeting began with the same question, anything new, and always ended with the same shake of the head. There were no direct witnesses, no surveillance cameras on County Road 14 at the time, a rural area, no toll booths, no stores with. All they had were fragmented accounts. One person said they saw a white van, another misremembered the day, someone else claimed they heard a strange noise, but couldn't pinpoint the direction. Every piece of information was checked, recorded, and then placed in the unsubstantiated column. Ethan Rourke remained the only name that stood out on the suspect list, but as the police tried to expand the investigation into his past and habits, they hit a solid wall. The Rourke family. The aging father in Springfield hired a private attorney, continuously sending documents demanding respect for privacy and to avoid criminalizing an unsighted citizen. Rourke's sister, who worked at a local construction company, provided an alibi, a copy of a gas station receipt in Mattoon dated the same day Elena disappeared. However, when the technical team checked, they found the receipt was printed by an old machine and did not match the time format of the gas station's system in 2000. It was clearly fake, but not enough to prosecute for falsifying evidence. The Rourke family had shielded him with a thin but impenetrable layer of legality. On a rainy afternoon, Sergeant Matt Connolly and two investigators visited Rourke's house again. The house was still tidy, the windows closed, the white van parked in the yard, the vehicle's floor having been replaced with new carpeting. Rourke opened the door, a faint smile on his lips. "You gentlemen are back? I thought I had answered everything." Connolly did not reply. He just looked around the empty garage, feeling as if every piece of evidence had been replaced, neat to the point of absurdity. After leaving, he noted in his ledger, suspect shows signs of evidence tampering, replacing floor mats, changing car oil, no new samples collected. Every lead dissolved. The Springfield lab confirmed they could not expand the DNA analysis. The sample under Elena's fingernails was too small, and 208 technology was insufficient to clearly separate and amplify the gene sequence. They had tried the PCR method several times, but the results only created short, disjointed fragments of sequences, impossible to match against Rourke's DNA. Cortez from Springfield sent an official memorandum. Current technology does not allow for effective analysis of trace-level DNA samples, touch DNA. Recommend preserving the sample under cold conditions 20°C for future retesting when techniques develop. In other words, the most valuable evidence, the thing that could convict or exonerate Rourke, was frozen in time. In a final internal meeting before the case was temporarily suspended, Connolly spread the crime scene photos on the table: the bent bicycle wheel, the dirt road modeled with tire tracks, the silver bracelet engraved with EP, and the aerial photo of Elena's body. No one spoke. They all knew every detail by heart, but there was nothing new to add. "We have enough to suspect," Connolly said, his voice hoarse, "but not enough to convict." A young investigator was silent for a moment, then asked, "What about him, Sergeant? Will he just go on living normally?" Connolly looked out the window, where the streetlights reflected off the cold raindrops. "Until we find more evidence, yes, he will." A few weeks later, the state prosecutor's office issued a brief announcement. Due to a lack of direct evidence and no additional scientific basis, the Elena Pierce case is temporarily archived. It may be reopened with new technology or evidence. The words "case suspended" were stamped in red on the cover of the file. Connolly held the stack of documents, feeling like he was holding a block of cold stone. He knew exactly what it meant: a stalemate. For many months afterward, the white van was still occasionally seen around town, rolling quietly as a silent reminder. People still talked, still looked at Rourke with wary eyes, but no one dared to say anything. The police no longer had the right to detain him, and Rourke knew it too. He moved to the western suburbs, living quietly, avoiding all contact, and at the police department, Connolly still occasionally visited the record storage, looking at the box labeled code. Each time he opened it, he reread the last line of the forensic report: possible connection, but not sufficient for conviction. The town of Georgetown slowly returned to its old pace of life, but for those who participated in the investigation, the Elena Pierce case never truly closed. It lingered in their memory like an unhealed cut, like an unsolved mystery. The year 2008 closed with Elena's photo still hanging in Sergeant Connolly's office, covered with a thin layer of dust. Under the weak light, The 15-year-old girl's face was still smiling, a smile that brought everyone even more anguish, and on that cold file cover, the word suspended stood out clearly like a verdict for the entire case. Nothing more. No one arrested. No one convicted. In early 2009, nearly half a year after the temporary suspension of investigation conclusion was signed, the Elena Pierce file was officially categorized as a cold case by the Illinois State Police. The administrative note on the internal data portal was chillingly simple. Case SARO 8809, HE17, no active leads, all evidence sealed under ISP archive storage protocol. A young forensic technician wearing rubber gloves placed each sealed bag into an aluminum container. Each bag was coded: beige fibers, mud sample, fingernail, DNA, sweater, bracelet, watch, crime scene photos. All were secured with red sealing tape, then neatly arranged in the silver container. When the container lid closed, the dry click of the lock echoed, like the final bolt on a door that had just closed permanently. On the ground floor of the ISP Center in Springfield, hundreds of file boxes were stacked on metal shelves, each box an unfinished story. Among countless cold codes, SARO 8809, HE17, was just one of many cases that fell into the gap between science and time. Sergeant Matt Connolly had by then been transferred to the training division for young investigators. Before leaving the department, he visited the archive one last time. The fluorescent light shone on the long, deep rows of shelves. Connolly quietly placed his hand on Elena's file box, gently tapping it 3 times. "The time will come when someone opens you," he murmured. "I just hope that by then they have what we did." After him, Detective Clara Monroe, the youngest female investigator in the unit, was assigned to manage the cold case files. She was meticulous, patient, and had worked under Connolly. Clara spent many nights reviewing the crime scene reports, reading every line of description in Lewis's forensic report, and pinning Elena's old photo back on the small office bulletin board at the end of the hall. But then Clara herself was gradually swept up in the new workflow. In 2010, she was transferred to the Cybercrime Investigation Unit. The Elena Pierce case, no witnesses, no DNA, no new testing techniques, slowly dropped off the priority list. The bulletin board in her office was taken down, leaving only a faint circular mark on the wall where Elena's photo had once hung. Time passed, and the town of Georgetown also gradually healed. The newspapers that once printed the missing 15-year-old girl's photo were now yellowed, stacked at the bottom of the local library's file cabinet. People spoke less about the white van, or the electrician, as if everything was just a vague memory. But for the Pierce family, the case had never truly closed. Mr. Robert Pierce, his hair silver, still regularly submitted a petition for reinvestigation to the ISP every year. Miss Diane kept Elena's bedroom intact, the floral blanket neatly folded, the old doll placed at the head of the bed. "She will come back, or at least, the truth will come back," she told every reporter who knocked on the door. Miss Roberts' petitions usually received only a standard response: "Thank you for your concern. There are currently no new developments in the case. We will keep the file on record and notify you if there are any noteworthy developments." No one really read them anymore. The Elena Pierce case gradually became a small line on the long list of the state's cold cases. Occasionally Clara Monroe still thought of it. Whenever she walked past the basement corridor where the evidence storage was located, she would glance at the letters HC17 taped on the silver box. Sometimes she thought about reopening it, but then stopped herself. There was nothing new to see, no technology powerful enough to revive those faint DNA cells. Years passed, and investigative techniques changed. Crime scene scanners were replaced, data systems were upgraded, and old staff like Connolly had all retired. The name Elena Pierce gradually disappeared from weekly reports, only appearing on the unsolved cases pre-2010 list. However, for 10 years the Pierce family did not give up. On every anniversary of their daughter's birthday, they wrote letters to the ISP, to the governor's office, and even to investigative television programs. In a brief interview in 2018, Mrs. Diane said on local television, "We are not looking for revenge. We just need to know what happened to her. If someone out there still remembers Elena, please say her name. That's all." That sentence caught the local community's attention. A few small articles on online news sites brought up the old case, with the headline, "10 years later, Georgetown still waits for answers." But those articles were quickly forgotten amid a flood of new news. In the ISP archive, Elena's evidence box still lay on the third floor, the second shelf from the bottom. The label read, the writing faded, stored Feb. 2, do not discard. No one knew that inside that cold box, within a small glass test tube, the incomplete DNA sample of the perpetrator was still preserved at 20. Clara Monroe left the ISP in 2019, moving to become an instructor training new investigators at the State Police Academy. While packing her belongings, she found the old file, and Elena's photo fell out of the cover. She picked it up, looking at the girl's face with wavy brown hair and a gentle smile. It felt like an unpaid debt. Before leaving, Clara left a short note in her duty logbook, Pierce case, retain all evidence, do not destroy. Someday someone will need it. And she was right, because a decade later, that very note would lead to the reopening of the file, starting the next chapter of the case that seemed to have gone dormant. The case named Elena Pierce. Georgetown had returned to peace, but in the archives of the Illinois State Police, the silver file box with code Gen 0809, HC117, lay silently among hundreds of unsolved cases. Inside, the glass test tube contained a DNA sample too small to be useful with 208 technology, but it was preserved intact, thanks to the old note. Retain all evidence. Do not destroy. In early 2023, the state of Illinois launched the statewide Cold Case DNA Initiative, a project using new technology to review lingering murder files. The project allowed for the reanalysis of trace samples using mini-STR and touch DNA, techniques that can build a genetic profile from just a few skin cells. In the list of hundreds of selected cases, case Gen 0809, HC17, appeared with a handwritten comment, possible connection, not sufficient for conviction. That name made Clara Monroe, who had participated in the investigation and now having returned to the cold case team, she decided to reopen the case she had considered an unfinished debt. Clara went directly to the third-floor archive, where the dusty silver file box had rested for 50. She broke the seal, checking each evidence bag, the sweater, the bracelet, the beige microfiber, and especially the small test tube containing the biological sample collected under the victim's fingernails. The faint label was still there. Specimen 12, partial male. The samples were transferred to the Springfield lab, now equipped with a new generation DNA extraction system. The technical team leader, Dr. Adam Keller, received the sample and said, Mini-STR can recover even broken gene sequences. If there's anything left in here, we'll find it. In the sterile room, a technician gently opened the test tube, placing the sample under the amplification device. The mini-STR system began reading the fragmented DNA sequences from short gene fragments were amplified and pieced back together. After many hours, the electrophoregram gradually appeared on the screen, straight in complete peaks. Keller quietly exhaled, we have a complete profile. Male gender 999999. The thing that had once rendered the entire team helpless was now clear before their eyes. The complete genetic map of the perpetrator. The lab immediately submitted the profile to the National CODIS system. The computer ran a match check against millions of stored DNA samples. The progress bar flickered, then stopped with a soft ping. The screen displayed the words match found. Ethan Rourke, convicted, Springfield County 2004, sexual assault case. No more words were needed. The room was silent for a few seconds. Then Keller printed the result. The final line on the report read, the probability of random match is less than 1 in 1.1 trillion. Clara held the paper, her hand trembling slightly. She remembered Rourke's face in the interrogation room that year. The faint smile, the sarcastic tone, you are wasting your time. Now his own DNA had spoken, after 15 years of waiting. She called Deputy Prosecutor Janet Linder, who had rejected the prosecution in 2008, due to lack of evidence. Linder's voice faltered when she heard the news. Are you saying, a complete match? Yes, Clara replied, a full profile, an absolute match with the DNA record stored in the system from 2004. It's no longer a possible connection, but direct proof. Linder's voice deepened, then this case was never over. Prepare the reinvestigation file. I will request an arrest warrant. Clara hung up, sitting quietly. The afternoon light shone through the window, reflecting on the photo of Elena placed on the desk. the 15-year-old girl with a gentle smile. Next to it was the 3-page printout of the DNA sequence, the thing that had just connected the whole story. She wrote in her investigation journal, "Case reopened, DNA match confirmed. Suspect, Ethan Rourke." The ISP internal system automatically updated the status, case SIN 08809HC17, status, reopened. After 15 years, the case that seemed forgotten was awakened. Not by luck, but by a tiny strand of DNA that Alina managed to leave behind, like a final message sent to justice. When the DNA results were confirmed, the Illinois State Police, ISP cold case team immediately opened Phase 2 of the investigation. A complete review of all technical data collected in 2008, data that was considered unrecoverable at the time. The ISP Digital Forensics Lab utilized new retrieval software, capable of restoring old cell tower data stored by carriers in a federal data warehouse. Files extracted from the month Alina went missing, which were encoded in the ancient GSM format, were now decrypted and displayed on a modern digital map. When the first layer of coordinates appeared, the room fell silent. The red signal dots represented Ethan Rourke's phone, the device that had sent faint pings the 2008 investigation could not identify. Now, the map clearly showed Rourke's phone signal was within a 1-mile radius of County Road 14, precisely during the time frame Alina left her home. Investigator Clara Monroe stood by the monitor, her heart pounding. She saw the subsequent ping points move along the old road leading out of town, and then switch off abruptly at 7:00 p.m., matching exactly with the time Alina was determined to have lost contact. "It can't be a coincidence," the technician said. "All this data perfectly matches the report from that year. The only difference is we now have precise geolocation evidence." Simultaneously, the traffic engineering team retrieved the traffic camera footage on the highway connecting Georgetown and Mattoon. Although the original system from 2008 no longer existed, the ISP had saved periodic copies for research purposes. After hours of scrutiny, they detected a blurry but identifiable frame, a white Dodge van driving toward Perry County just a few hours after Alina disappeared. The license plate was unclear, but the rear bumper was broken at one corner, a detail matching the description of Rourke's vehicle during its initial inspection. The deeper they delved, the more the facts aligned. In the financial database, investigators discovered a copy of a gas card receipt from Clark's fuel station, 3 miles from the scene. The transaction recorded the time and the last 4 digits of the credit card registered under the name E. Rourke. The note read, "Fuel, Paw Wash, 6." As the pieces of data were put together, Rourke's travel map emerged clearly. 5:40 p.m., phone ping near the Pierce home. 6:00 p.m., signal stable at County Road 14. 6:58 p.m., transaction at Clark's Fuel. 7:05 p.m., vehicle appears on traffic camera heading toward Perry County. There was no room left for alibis. Rourke's claim of being at work in Mattoon had completely collapsed. Clara stared at the spinning data sequence on the screen. She recalled the old interrogation he had said, "I was just passing through." Now the data proved he hadn't just passed through, he had stopped right where Alina vanished. The technical team finalized the 4-page comprehensive report, signed, Digital Forensics Division, Evidence Recovery. Conclusion: cell tower data, camera footage, and financial transactions confirm Ethan Rourke's presence in the County Road 14 area during the time frame victim Alina Pierce went missing. Recommendation: reinitiate criminal investigation and prosecute suspect. When the report was sent to the Illinois State's Attorney's Office, the status in the automatic system changed. Case SIN 0809HC17, status, officially reopened, digital evidence corroborated. 15 years later, justice finally had its new language, digital data. The seemingly faded signals from the old 2008 phone had spoken up, bringing the Alina Pierce case back into the light, and making Ethan Rourke the official target for prosecution by the state of Illinois. After the DNA and digital evidence were confirmed, the Alina Pierce case officially entered a phase of comprehensive reinvestigation. Detective Clara Monroe was appointed lead investigator, coordinating with FBI agent Daniel Shaw, a seasoned specialist in federal cold cases. On their first day meeting at the ISP cold case office, Clara spread the entire old file across the table. The papers were yellowed, the staples rusted, but every line of text remained clear. "I've lived with this case for 15 years, she said. And now we can finally tell the whole story with evidence, no longer just assumption." Shaw nodded. He had heard of the Georgetown case, the 15-year-old girl who went missing, the white van, and the electrician suspect who was never prosecuted. He looked at the old newspaper clippings pinned to the board, a photo of Elena by her bicycle, a photo of the dry pond crime scene in Perry County. "I want to review the entire forensic chain," he said. "We need to match every timeline, every sample, from start to finish." In the investigation room, the white lamplight shone on a large board covered with maps, crime scene diagrams, and the new timeline. They began to piece together the chain of forensic evidence, which had been disjointed 5th time. Based on cell tower data, Ethan Rourke's phone appeared near the Pierce home at 5:40 p.m., at County Road 14 at 6 location. Traffic cameras and the Clark's fuel receipt established his route passing through the road leading to Perry County, where the body was discovered. DNA. The sample under Elena's fingernails matched absolutely with Rourke's DNA on file from a vehicle. Beige microfibers found on Elena's shirt were the same type as the interior carpet of a 1993 Dodge van, the same model Rourke owned. When the 4 elements were connected, the chain of evidence formed a closed loop. Clara pinned red cards onto the board. Time, location, DNA, vehicle. Beside them, she scribbled in marker, complete structure, probability of random coincidence near 0. Shaw sat in contemplation, looking at the logical sequence. "It's so perfect it can't be a coincidence," he said. "We no longer need a confession." But they still needed a new, official, and complete investigation report to submit to the state's attorney's office to request a surveillance order for the suspect. Clara and Shaw began to review Rourke's life after, according to administrative records, Rourke had moved 3 times, currently living in a Springfield suburb, working maintenance for a refrigeration company. He had no new criminal record, lived a low-key life, and avoided social media. However, through the financial system, the investigation team discovered Rourke was still using the same credit card noted in the Clark's fuel transaction that year. They also found he bought a new pickup truck, but still kept the 1993 Dodge van, now dilapidated, registration suspended. "This guy thought everything was over," Shaw said, looking at the file. "We're going to prove him wrong." In the state's attorney's office, Clara presented the entire case again before Deputy State's Attorney Janet Linder, who had dismissed the prosecution. Linder read every page, her face stern, but her eyes changed when she reached the DNA and cell tower data sections. "This time," she said slowly, "we have everything." The new investigation file, over 80 pages long, was completed within 2 weeks. On the first page, the title was printed in bold: State of Illinois, Homicide Reinvestigation Report Victim, Elena Pierce, age 15. Georgetown, IL, 2008 Primary Suspect, Ethan Rourke, male, 52 Springfield, IL. In the summary section, Clara wrote, "Independent physical, genetic, and digital evidence all point to one individual. No factor of chance exists to explain this correlation. Requesting a surveillance order and preparation for state-level criminal prosecution." Linder finished reviewing and signed the document. Approved, motion to surveillance and arrest pending warrant. Immediately thereafter, the FBI, in coordination with the ISP, began covert surveillance of Rourke. A team of agents set up tracking his vehicle's movements, installed cameras outside his residential area, and requested border checkpoints to log his old Dodge van if detected moving. Clara monitored everything from the coordination center. On the screen, every moving signal dot was a heartbeat of the investigation she had spent a lifetime waiting for. 15 years, Shaw said, standing beside her, but sometimes justice only needs one person, who doesn't give up. She looked up at the pinboard, where Elena's photo still hung. Below the photo, she added a short line in red marker: Evidence chain complete. Target, Ethan Rourke. Next phase, surveillance and arrest. The Elena Pierce case was officially reinvestigated, and this time, there were no loopholes for the culprit to escape. After the reinvestigation file was approved, Ethan Rourke became the official target of the cold case team. Under the alias Evan Rowe, he lived quietly in Springfield, renting a ground-floor apartment in an old residential area, working as a maintenance technician for a small refrigeration company. He went to work on time, came home late, and did not socialize with neighbors, the type of person no one noticed, and no one wanted to talk to. But for Detective Clara Monroe and FBI agent Daniel Shaw, his every move was tracked minute by minute. They coordinated with the Technical Surveillance Division to establish covert tracking, hidden cameras in the streetlight pole outside his house, a GPS device attached to the undercarriage of his pickup truck, and a team of undercover agents taking turns tailing him from a distance. In the initial days, Rourke showed no unusual behavior. He drove to the company's cold storage facility, worked silently, ate lunch in his truck, and drove straight home. But to Shaw, this normality was what made him wary. Guilty people know how to make themselves invisible, he told Clara as they reviewed the footage. But everyone leaves a trace. We just need the right moment to collect it. The opportunity came on a Tuesday morning. The surveillance team observed Rourke carrying a trash bag out to the public dumpster at the end of the alley. Clara immediately requested a warrant to collect the biological waste for analysis, a legal procedure for open murder investigations. 2 plainclothes technicians collected the trash bag that same night. In the Springfield lab, they separated suspicious items: a soda can with residual lip prints, an old toothbrush, and a used tissue. The samples were handled carefully, cross-referenced with the DNA sequence obtained from Elena Pierce's fingernails. The results took only a few hours to confirm. A complete match. The probability of error was less than 1 in 10. Clara held the printout of the results, feeling as if the weight of 15 years of waiting had finally been released. She sent the report directly to Deputy State's Attorney Janet Linder and the FBI Springfield field office. No doubt left, she said. We have current evidence and direct DNA. He is still who he was, Ethan Rourke. That same afternoon, Linder signed the federal arrest warrant based on the charge of intentional homicide, along with the act of concealing identity and evading prosecution. The FBI and ISP jointly drafted a coordination plan. One team would intercept Rourke on his way to work, another team would search his apartment and the old Dodge van, now covered in dust in an out-of-town garage. When the plan was approved, Clara stood before the timeline board in the command room. Elena's photo was still there, now faded with time. She looked into the brown eyes in the picture, whispering almost only loud enough for herself to hear. Justice is coming, Elena. We're about to bring him in. The night before the operation, the surveillance team continued to tail him. From a distance, through the camera lens, Rourke sat in his small apartment, drinking beer, watching television, seemingly unaware that the world around him had changed. And the DNA sequence under a girl's fingernails in 2008 was leading him to the end of his freedom. As dawn broke, Clara signed the final report. Warrant executed. Subject, Ethan Rourke, aka Evan Rowe. The arrest was about to begin, and this time nothing could save him from the truth. Since 5 a.m. the small residential area where he rented his apartment had been secretly sealed off. Inside the command vehicle, Detective Clara Monroe and FBI agent Daniel Shaw reviewed the arrest warrant one last time. The screen displayed live footage from a camera mounted outside the suspect's house. Rourke had just left his bedroom putting on his jacket, preparing to go to work as usual. Alpha Team move, Shaw said into the radio. 3 unmarked SUVs silently moved onto the narrow street, their tires rolling on the wet pavement without a sound. As Rourke stepped out the door, car keys in hand, red and blue lights flashed on with a sudden shout, FBI, do not move. Rourke froze, his eyes wide. Instinct made him try to turn back, but 2 agents were already upon him, securing his hands behind his back in seconds. The dry, decisive click of handcuffs echoed. The entire neighborhood remained silent. Only his shallow breathing and the steady commands over the radio could be heard. Meanwhile, a second investigative team conducted a search of the rental house under a federal court order. Everything in the small apartment was photographed, numbered and sealed. In a bottom kitchen drawer they discovered an old folded quarter-size map of the Georgetown, Perry County area, with routes marked in red pen. Under the bed was an old Clark's fuel card, the serial number matching a receipt in the... At the end of the hallway a technician opened the closet and paused. Hanging on a hanger was a silver-gray work jacket, with a faded Dodge logo, frayed at the cuffs, a typical technician's jacket. The pocket contained a few strands of beige fiber material, consistent with the interior carpet of a 1993 van. Nearby was a cardboard box containing a neatly cut fragment of old car carpet, its color and texture an exact match for the sample sent to Springfield years ago. All evidence was photographed, sealed in coated plastic bags, E01. Road map. Georgetown, Perry County, marked routes. E02. Fuel card. Clark's fuel serial matched. E03. Work jacket. Dodge emblem. Fiber samples inside pocket. E04. Carpet fragment. Dodge van 1993 interior type. Clara monitored the entire process live from the command vehicle. When she saw the image of the technician lifting the carpet piece, she quietly clenched her hand. It was the final piece, the evidence connecting 15 years of investigation. 2 hours later, the entire scene was cleared, the apartment was sealed, and each piece of evidence was transferred into specialized metal containers, labeled ISP and F. The chain of custody was established on site, detailing the collector, time and storage conditions, ensuring no object could be suspected of manipulation. At the FBI Springfield headquarters, Rourke was led into the interrogation room. Gone was the composure he held in 2008. He hung his head, hair matted with sweat. When Clara stepped in, he looked up, his eyes a mix of suspicion and fatigue. "Still following me?" He gave a weak smile. "No," Clara replied, her voice calm. "Justice followed you." She placed a thin folder in front of him, containing only the photos of the newly seized evidence, the map, the fuel card, the jacket, the carpet fragment, and on the first page, the DNA result was printed in bold text. Match confirmed. E. Rourke, victim, E. Pierce. He remained silent for a long time. Only the faint whirring of the recording machine could be heard. Outside, Shaw signed the operation completion report. Operation Row executed at 06:42. The evidence transport vehicle drove out of the neighborhood, the morning light reflecting off the ISP, evidence transport lettering on the metal containers. 15 years later, all the final pieces had been put together, legally, clearly, and undeniably. The Elena Pierce case had reached a turning point that investigators had only dared to dream of. The killer was finally arrested, along with all the evidence binding him to the 2 weeks after the arrest, Ethan Rourke's file was officially transferred to the state's attorney office of Illinois, Urbana District. In charge of the prosecution was ADA Rebecca Hall, a young prosecutor known for her sharpness in cold cases. Upon receiving the nearly 200-page stack of documents from the cold case team and the FBI, Hall said simply, "We are going to end this once and for all." In the first meeting, Hall, along with Detective Clara Monroe and Agent Daniel Shaw, reviewed the entire body of evidence. Everything was presented concisely and clearly, like a map leading directly to the crime. DNA. The male genetic profile, found under the victim's fingernails, matched Rourke's DNA sample perfectly, with an accuracy of 1. Fibers, beige nylon fibers on Elena's jacket, matched the type of carpet in a 1993 Dodge van, the same model Rourke owned. Cell tower data. Rourke's phone pinged within a 1-mile radius of County Road 14 at the exact time Elena went missing. Traffic cameras. Footage showed a white Dodge van moving in the direction of Perry County shortly thereafter. Fuel receipt. Rourke's Clark's fuel card confirmed a transaction at a station 3 miles from the scene. Hall placed the stack of files on the table, her gaze determined. "This is the most seamless chain of evidence I have ever seen in a cold case. There is no room for doubt." She drafted the indictment with 2 main charges: first-degree murder of Elena Pierce, interstate transport of victim and evidence, a federal violation because the body was discovered in Perry County, Indiana. The FBI committed to supporting simultaneous state and federal prosecution to ensure the maximum penalty. In the temporary holding cell in Springfield, Rourke received the indictment notice. When the police officer finished reading, he only looked up, offering a tired smile. 15 years, you really couldn't forget. Clara, standing outside the glass, whispered, Elena couldn't forget either. On the day the grand jury convened at the Urbana courthouse, Rebecca Hall presented the entire file. She began with the statement, 15 years ago, a 15-year-old girl left home and never returned. Today, through technology and perseverance, we have heard her final voice. She displayed each piece of evidence, crime scene photos, location diagrams, the DNA chart, and the grainy frame of the white van. Each piece fit perfectly, reconstructing the crime journey that had been buried. No one on the panel had any doubt after Hall's conclusion, "This is no longer conjecture, this is science. This is the truth, and this is justice. After 3 hours of review, the grand jury voted unanimously 12-0, approving the indictment of Ethan Rourke on the 2 aforementioned charges. That same afternoon, the judge set the date for the preliminary hearing at the Urbana District Court, where the case was considered one of the largest cold cases solved by DNA technology in Illinois. The evening news quickly spread across the state. Headlines ran on television channels. 15 years later, justice catches up. Ethan Rourke indicted for murder of teen Elena Pierce. Clara watched the news in silence, then looked over at the photo of Elena hanging in her office. The girl's smile was as gentle as it was on the afternoon she left home years ago. After 15 years, justice finally had a name, and this time, it carried the weight of science, determination, and undeniable truth. Ethan Rourke's trial opened at the Urbana District Court in early June, drawing large crowds of reporters and residents from Georgetown. 15 years of waiting had brought everyone to this moment, the moment the perpetrator had to face the truth. The courtroom was packed, white light shone down on the jury box, and in the center sat Rourke, wearing an orange inmate shirt, hands cuffed, his face ashen. ADA Rebecca Hall stepped up, opening the trial with a clear, resonant voice, without needing notes. On September 3, 2008, 15-year-old Elena Pierce left home on her bicycle and never returned. For 15 years, her family and the entire state of Illinois have waited for an answer. Today, we will show you scientific evidence does not forget, DNA does not forget, and justice does not forget. Hall began to present the complete forensic chain, a structure pieced together from hundreds of fragments of evidence over more than a decade. The DNA sample under the victim's fingernails, cryopreserved at ISP since 2008, was now fully sequenced using mini-STR and touch DNA technology. The result was an absolute match to Rourke's biological profile on file since 2004. Cell tower data proved his phone was near County Road 14 at the exact time Elena vanished. Traffic cameras recorded the white Dodge van driving towards Perry County where the body was found. Beige fibers on the victim's jacket matched the type of carpet Rourke had used in his van. The Clark's fuel receipt bearing the serial number of his credit card proved his interstate travel immediately after the crime. Hall concluded her opening statement, "You may call this a coincidence, but when separate fragments are bound together, it is no longer a coincidence, it is scientific truth." It was the turn of Rourke's defense attorney, Mr. Kenneth Doyle, to he did not deny everything but directly attacked the validity of the old DNA sample. "Your Honor, we are talking about a DNA sample stored since 2008, 15 years. Who can guarantee it was not contaminated, not degraded, not skewed during the preservation process? This evidence, if not absolute, cannot convict a person." A few jury members exchanged glances. Doyle continued, his voice rising, "Mini-STR technology was only developed recently. You are relying on a new technology to convict for an old act. Can you be sure the result is not due to error? We do not convict based on possibility, but on certainty." The atmosphere in the courtroom quieted, but Hall was prepared for this moment. She called her next witness, Dr. Margaret Lewis, ISP chief forensic expert, who personally conducted Elena's examination. Lewis stepped onto the stand, her hair gray but her voice still strong. The evidence was sealed under 20 degrees conditions, stored in a national-level security system. Each year the file is checked periodically. There is no sign of contamination, no deviation. Doyle cross-examined, "Do you have proof that the sample has not degraded after 15 years? Lewis smiled slightly, producing the ISP preservation report. "We do. Storage temperature is automatically monitored 24/7, and this DNA sample has been cross-referenced with control samples. The error rate of mini-STR analysis is below 0.0001%, nearly zero. If you wish to call that reasonable doubt, counselor, you will have to redefine the term reasonable." Murmurs erupted throughout the courtroom. Doyle was silent, asking no further questions. Hall continued by calling Dr. Adam Keller, head of the 2023 forensic team. He presented the modern analysis procedure, extraction, amplification and 3 independent checks, with completely identical results. Keller projected an image of the electrophoregram chart onto the screen. The DNA peaks matched perfectly between the crime scene sample and Rourke's profile. There is no overlap, No technical error. This is a complete match. This data can be replicated in any lab worldwide, he stated definitively. Rourke, seated below, frowned, but remained silent. There was no way to deny the scientific truth. In the afternoon, Hall presented her closing argument. Ethan Rourke thought that time would conceal his guilt, but Elena Pierce left behind undeniable evidence. A scratch under her fingernail, a tiny strand of DNA smaller than a dust particle, yet enough to say everything. She resisted, she left her final testimony, and 15 years later, that testimony brought the killer here. The courtroom fell silent. In the public seating, Mr. Robert Pierce bowed his head, his hands clasped tightly. Mrs. Diane wept quietly, saying, "Finally, my daughter has been spoken for." When the court concluded the arguments, the jury retired to the deliberation room. The door closed, leaving behind a heavy silence. At this hour, there were no more arguments, no more charts, only the belief in justice. 8 hours passed. Outside, the sky darkened. Inside the courtroom, everyone waited. Rebecca Hall sat beside Clara, silent. Shaw leaned against the wall, his eyes fixed on the door of the deliberation room. Precisely at 10 p.m., the door opened. The foreman of the jury handed a folded paper to the judge. The light shone on the paper as he read aloud. "The jury has unanimously reached a verdict guilty on both counts. First-degree murder and interstate transport of a body." Cries erupted throughout the room. Rebecca Hall bowed her head, tears rolling down quickly, but a slight smile appearing. Clara squeezed her hand, whispering, "Elena has been brought home." After 15 years, justice finally prevailed, not by luck, but by science, persistence, and an unwavering belief. The Urbana County courtroom fell silent as Judge Eleanor Briggs ascended the bench. The sharp rap of the gavel marked the beginning of the sentencing, the final chapter of a case that had dragged on for 15 years. Ethan Rourke was led to the center of the courtroom. Dressed in a gray prison uniform, he was thinner than when he was arrested, his gaze empty. Behind him, the gallery was packed with reporters, investigators, and the family of Elena Pierce. In the front row, Robert Pierce clenched his wife's hand, his head bowed. Diane Pierce held a photo of her daughter, her eyes weary from nearly 2 decades of waiting. The judge looked down at the defendant, her voice measured and resolute. "Ethan Rourke, the jury has found you guilty of first-degree murder and interstate transportation of a body. Based on the brutality of your actions, the lengthy period of evasion, and the immeasurable pain inflicted upon the victim's family, the court sentences you to 45 years in state prison without the possibility of parole." A heavy silence descended. Only the gavel struck again, deep, final, like a definitive end to the tragedy. Rourke showed no reaction. He raised his head, his eyes briefly lost, then offered a faint smile, the hollow grin of a man with no options left. As marshals escorted him away, he turned back, looking through the thick glass partition. On the other side, Rebecca Hall stood straight, her gaze fixed on him. She said nothing, only nodded. A quiet farewell to the just sentence that should have arrived. Judge Briggs continued, reading the court's conclusion. "The case of Pierce v. Rourke will be recorded as a landmark cold case, solved thanks to advancements in DNA technology and the coordination between state and federal investigative agencies. The court expresses its respect for the Illinois cold case team and those who never gave up." Clara Monroe sat in the investigators section, her eyes moist but her smile serene. Beside her, Special Agent Daniel Shaw quietly exhaled, making a quick note in his pad. Case closed. Justice served. Behind them, as the judge left the courtroom, a small sob broke the silence. Diane Pierce pressed a hand to her chest, softly whispering, "Finally my daughter can rest in peace." Robert turned to grasp his wife's hand, his voice trembling but firm. "Justice has found you, Elena." Police escorted Rourke down the long hallway, leading to the basement detention facility. The clank of his metal shackles on the stone floor echoed. The fluorescent lights reflected off his cold, emotionless face. He vanished behind the steel door, leaving behind the hushed, broken whispers of those who had waited for this day for half a lifetime. In the courthouse corridor, Rebecca Hall signed the final case document, her handwriting decisive. State v. Ethan Rourke, convicted. Sentence: 45 years without parole. The evening news that night spread across Illinois. Illinois cold case solved after 15 years. DNA breakthrough leads to conviction. News agencies called it a triumph of science and tenacity. State police announced that the Elena Pierce case would be used as a training model for cold case units nationwide, proving that time may pass, but justice does not lose its trail. Late that evening, Clara Monroe paused on the courthouse steps, looking up at the still Urbana night sky. She gently opened the old case file. The first page held a photo of a radiant 15-year-old girl on her bicycle. She whispered, "We found the truth for you, Elena." The yellow light from the hallway spilled out, illuminating the inscription on the file cover, Case File 0823, Pierce closed. 15 years, a journey concluded, but for those who lived through it, the verdict was more than just an end. It was an affirmation that justice, though delayed, always has the final say. Immediately after the 45-year sentence without parole was handed down to Ethan Rourke, the Illinois State Police, ISP, convened a large-scale press conference in Springfield. At the podium, ISP Director Harold Nance declared the Elena Pierce case would be recorded as a historical milestone in the field of modern forensic investigation in the state. Addressing dozens of reporters, he stated clearly, if in 2008, the technology was insufficient to hear Elena Pierce's voice, in 2023, science helped us do just that. This case proves that every piece of evidence, no matter how small, if preserved correctly, can speak the truth. In the following weeks, the ISP published a special 47-page summary report analyzing the entire investigative process, from evidence preservation to the reanalysis of DNA using mini-STR and touch DNA technology. The report highlighted that the standard for long-term evidence storage was the key factor in solving the case. If the DNA thread under Elena's fingernail had been damaged even slightly, the entire 15-year process would have been meaningless. Based on this success, the ISP proposed a standardized set of procedures for long-term DNA storage statewide. Biological samples must be stored under 24 search conditions and inspected every 6 months. The chain of custody must be digitally signed and stored in 2 independent systems. Evidence classified as cold case must be re-evaluated every 5 years using the latest technology. This proposal was quickly approved by the Illinois Governor's Office, accompanied by a special $12 million budget to build the state's first cold case DNA bank. This facility, located in Peoria, is operated by a specialized team of forensic and data scientists. The goal, to digitize and standardize all unidentified DNA profiles from the 1980s to the present, allowing cross-referencing with the National CODIS database in hours instead of the weeks it previously took. The press called this the Elena Pierce Legacy, a model program for connecting science, justice, and persistence. At the Illinois State Police Academy, the case was integrated into the curriculum for forensic science and cold case investigation training. In the classroom, new officers were shown the entire investigation timeline, from the missing person report, the discovery of the body, the prolonged deadlock, to the DNA breakthrough. On the projected screen, the text appeared, Case 0823, the girl who spoke through DNA. Clara Monroe, now supervisor of the Central Illinois Cold Case Team, was invited to teach the first session of the course. She stood at the podium, her voice steady and firm. Technology is merely a tool. It is the people, those who never quit, those who believe the truth is still out there, who make justice endure. Below, dozens of young officers listened silently. In the white light of the classroom, Elena's image emerged, a 15-year-old girl with a clear smile, her bicycle leaning on the lawn. No one spoke, but everyone understood why they chose this profession. Forensic research institutes nationwide began citing the Pierce case in professional conferences, viewing it as the standard for evidence preservation and the application of new generation DNA analysis technology. A group of experts from New York and California traveled to Illinois to learn the mini-STR reanalysis procedure, opening the door for federal collaboration in handling backlogged cases. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, also sent an official commendation letter, praising the coordination between the ISP and the Springfield Cold Case Unit. It stated clearly, the Pierce case is not only a victory for Illinois, but also a testament to the enduring spirit of the American investigative system, where justice never expires. From a case thought to be forgotten, Elena Pierce became a symbol of revival in the cold case investigation sector. The summary report was displayed at the Justice Through Time exhibition at the Springfield Science Museum, next to a plaque inscribed with the words, 2008, a girl went missing. 2023, science helped her tell her story. That evening, Clara Monroe stopped before the display, watching the light reflect off the inscription. She smiled faintly. 15 years, it not only closed a case, but also opened a new chapter for American criminal investigation. An era where technology and conviction together write justice. The following autumn, the town of Georgetown adopted a different atmosphere. No longer a somber Midwestern suburb haunted by an unsolved disappearance, it was a place where people recounted a story of faith and justice. On the dirt road leading to the cornfield where Elena Pierce was last seen, the town erected a polished bronze memorial plaque. The inscription was deeply carved into the surface, in memory of Elena Pierce, 1993-2008. She left home on her bicycle and never returned, but her courage led us to the truth. Beneath it was the emblem of the Illinois State Police and the Springfield Cold Case Team. Every year wildflowers still grew around that spot, and residents continued to leave bouquets of white daisies, a reminder that justice never sleeps, it only waits to be awakened. At Georgetown High School, where Elena had been a student, the administration announced the establishment of the Elena Pierce Memorial Scholarship Fund for female students pursuing forensic science, criminology and biotechnology. The principal stated at the inaugural ceremony, Elena did not get to grow up, but her story has helped hundreds of others understand that the truth is always worth fighting for. The photo of the girl smiling on her bicycle was hung in the school hallway, among rows of achievement medals and the alumni honor roll. Beneath the photo, a small bronze inscription read, "Her voice lives in science." The Pierce family still lived in their old house on Maple Street. After the trial, they did not move, nor did they wish to avoid the memories. Instead, they transformed their grief into a community ritual. Every year in early September, the anniversary of Elena's disappearance, they hold a candlelight vigil in the town square. Residents bring white candles, children carry balloons, and the high school choir sings Amazing Grace. Clara Monroe and Rebecca Hall attend every year. Without their investigator jackets, they stand mixed in with the crowd, silently watching the candlelight reflect on every face. As the light spread across the square, Clara often thought of the first moment she received the missing person call, that brief sound that led to the 15-year journey. "Every candle is an unsolved case," she whispered to Rebecca, "but as long as we keep lighting them, there will always be hope." That October, Illinois PBS television broadcast the documentary Justice Delayed is Not Justice Denied, a collaborative production between the ISP, FBI and investigative journalist Lauren Kate. The film recounted the entire Elena Pierce case, from the night she vanished, the desperate search, to the breakthrough in DNA technology. In the conclusion, Lauren's narration was calm and deep. Justice can arrive late, but if we persevere, it will come, not to change the past, but to save our faith in the future. The film garnered significant acclaim, screened at numerous universities and forensic academies, becoming an inspiration for a new generation of investigators. Students who watched the film all remembered the final scene. The faint yellow light shining down on the memorial plaque in the field, the sound of the wind rustling through the corn, and the whispered voiceover, "This is where Elena was last seen. It is also where justice was seen again." For the people of Georgetown, the Elena Pierce case was no longer just a personal tragedy, it became part of the community's identity. From a town haunted by fear, they learned to stand up, cooperate, and believe in the power of truth. In 2024, on the 16th anniversary of Elena's disappearance, the local government officially renamed County Road 14 to Pierce Way. The new street sign was erected by the roadside beneath the old yellow streetlight. On the dedication night, hundreds of candles were lit again, reflecting off the clear Midwestern sky. Clara Monroe stood quietly on the side of the road, watching the candlelight stretch with the wind. She knew that even though all the files were closed, there were other cases that needed to be opened, other Elenas who had not yet been found. But tonight, amidst the flickering light, she felt clearly the truth can be buried, but it never vanishes. On the road named Pierce, the yellow light still flickered, stretching into the darkness, and with it, a case was closed. A soul rested in peace, and justice, finally, was served. The Elena Pierce story reminds us that justice in the United States today is not just about luck, but about persistence, standards and technology. Specifically, the case only broke open when a minute DNA sample under the fingernail was correctly preserved for 15 years and reanalyzed using mini-STR touch DNA, cell tower data, traffic camera footage, and a Clark's fuel receipt pieced together a logical itinerary, and the chain of custody was maintained so the court would accept it. Practical lessons. Families and communities need to correctly document and store every detail from the start. Times, contacts, photos, receipts, private camera footage, small fragments, like phone pings or card transactions, can be the key later. 2. Be proactive about asking about evidence preservation standards and following up on progress. The persistence of the Pierce family annual petitions kept the file from being forgotten. 3. Support cold case initiatives like the statewide DNA review program, dedicated budgets, specialized DNA banks, and regular testing procedures can save other cases. 4. On a personal level, set up an emergency profile for children, most recent photo, vehicle description, travel habits, activate safe location sharing features, install doorbell cameras, because in this story, a blurry public camera frame combined with a cell tower ping broke the deadlock. 5. Respect science and standardization. When the defense attacked the validity of the old sample, only the transparency of preservation at 20. Finally, safeguard community memory. The memorial plaque, scholarship, candlelight vigil, PBS documentary, not just to remember, but to remind each other, preserve the data, trust the process, and never give up, because sometimes, justice is delayed but not lost. Thank you for following the story of Elena Pierce, a 15-year journey in search of justice and faith in the truth. Please subscribe to the channel to continue exploring other cold cases with us, where the light of justice is always waiting to be ignited.